Hey guys, wow, I just realized the camera isn't faced right. There we go. Welcome to our live training. We do this typically every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Obviously we have the holiday tomorrow for those of us in the U.S., Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. This week we changed the schedule around. We did it today. Instead, next week we'll be back to normal schedule. And I mentioned last week the idea of this series is just that there's no such thing as the winter slowdown. It's true, like I said last week, that the inventory is typically smaller, number of homes sold is typically lower, but that doesn't mean that you should basically be taking the next month and a half off. Okay, so there's a number of things that you can do during this time that will set you up for success as the market comes back around in the spring. And I'd start with lead generation. If you're not actively generating leads right now, you are wrong. Particularly if you're talking about online lead generation, because online leads are typically 3 to 6 months out from closing. So you should be generating leads now that will be coming to fruition in February, March, April, as you get into the spring season. But one of the other activities that you can do is now's a great time to kind of look back on the last year and really get a feel for how you did. Not just look at your goals, which of course is good, but also look at the different advertising venues and the activities that you did, and really evaluate them, not in a, well, that I enjoyed that or I felt good about that option, but evaluate it by the numbers. So a few weeks ago, I actually walked you through the math of how to evaluate an advertising option by the numbers, including your time cost. Brought out a little whiteboard, walked you through some of the math. But one thing I didn't do was actually walk you through a tool that we have that makes it super, super simple. So you don't have to do a bunch of multiplication and division and figure out your cost per lead and all that kind of stuff. We developed a tool that allows you to do it really quickly. It's called our advertising calculator. You can find it for free to anyone at recalculators.com. I put a link in the description here so you can check it out and follow along with me. If you have an account with us, you can find this in the help section under the coaching tab. There's a section marked calculators, and this will be the advertising calculator. Because again, you're going to put in some market realities that you deal with, and then it's going to basically ask you to put in the specifics about a particular advertising method. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples here. Again, what I would urge you is that you look back at all of your advertising dollars, whether it was spent on lead aggregators like Zillow, whether it was spent on open house stuff. Maybe you bought balloons and cookies and kind of the normal stuff we do for open houses. Maybe you got some magazine ads or some business cards, and really take a look at them by the numbers. Were those activities worth it for you? So I brought up here on my iPad. Oh, that changes the exposure quite a bit. I don't know if I just realized that it's backwards on my front-facing camera. So I won't hold it up the whole time, but you'll see this is the advertising calculator that we have at recalculators.com. And if you were to open it up, basically it's going to have some assumptions built in, asking you like what your income goals are, how many hours a week do you work and stuff like that. And what that's going to do is give you a time cost. And then it's going to have some, market realities that you're dealing with. What's the average home price in your area? What's the average commission split? How much do you keep from your broker? And what that will allow you to do is come up with a budget per lead. In other words, in order to be, fiscally responsible, how much should you spend as a maximum on a per lead basis? Okay, so it has those, and you'll of course put those in, and then it's going to ask you 3 questions. How much did the advertising idea cost in dollars? How much time did it take you? And then how many leads that were produced from the idea? So while we go through this, I'm just going to, just to give you an idea of what, numbers I'm dealing with, I just went with the defaults. So I work 40 hours a week, 50 weeks. So how much money does an idea cost? Well, let's use an example. The idea would be, I like to pick on this one, open houses. So how much money does the idea cost? Open houses typically are pretty inexpensive, but you're going to spend a few dollars on, like, say, candles, maybe balloons, some directional signs, stuff like that. So let's say you spent $50, pretty inexpensive. Okay. Now, my typical open house, the ones that I know agents do, will typically be 4 to 6 hours. So let's put 6 hours in there for this example. Again, you could put 4 hours if that's what you spend. And then how many leads were you able to produce from that idea? And I'd say a typical open house, I'd say maybe you generate 3 or 4 leads. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt and say you generated 4 leads. Now, when you hit calculate on this advertising calculator, it basically spits out whether it was a good idea, a great idea, or a bad idea. And it's done based on the metric of whether or not you spend less than 20% of your gross commission or less than the budget it gives you on a per lead basis. So in this scenario, my budget per lead, given those market realities, average home costs of $200,000, average commission rate of 3%, my budget per lead is $25 a lead. That's the most I can spend. But in this particular scenario, when I factor in my time cost, my time, assuming I want to make $100,000 a year and I'm working 40 hours a week, my time cost is actually $50 an hour. So if I spent 6 hours at an open house, that gives you a pretty significant time cost, even though the dollar cost was pretty small. So that ultimately gave me a cost per lead for an open house at around $87 per lead, which is significantly more than my budget allows. In other words, bad idea, right? So let's talk through a couple of other examples. Let's say you're doing a pay-per-click campaign on something like Google or Facebook. Now, this is going to vary pretty greatly depending on your ability to capture online traffic from Facebook and Google, and maybe we'll do a training video specifically on capture rates. Our website, our capture tools typically allow us to capture around 20 to 30% of all online visitors. So we're going to be pretty generous with this. Most websites are not going to have these kind of results. But let's say that a typical Google pay-per-click campaign costs us $300, okay, a month. And we'll just calculate on a monthly basis. If you're looking back over the whole year, you can actually take, over the course of a year or however long you did an advertising option, and you can calculate it that way. Now, Google pay-per-click campaigns take us maybe half an hour. We'll just be generous and say it took us an hour to set up. And then once you have it set up, you can pretty much let it run. And then typical for that, amount of money in, pretty average market, you're probably going to generate, at least with our system, and again, I can't speak for, the results with other websites, probably around 50 leads. Maybe 40 or 50 leads. And then I hit calculate. So again, according to this, and you can kind of see it, it gives me the little gray bar, and I know it's backwards on your screen, so I apologize for that. But it says great idea on it if you can read backwards. And the reason is, again, very little time cost. Now, fairly substantial dollar cost, but it's worth it because ultimately my budget per lead was about $25 a lead. And this costs me around $7 per lead to run a pay-per-click campaign. And again, that would be pretty normal for a market where the average home cost is about $200,000. Now, if you were in a market where the average home cost was significantly higher, you wouldn't be able to put these results in. But the idea isn't to necessarily run through examples here. The idea is to actually take your advertising venues, whatever you've done over the last year, and actually calculate it with this using this calculator. So I noticed there's a couple of people watching. You guys feel free to ask questions if this isn't making sense. The last advertising idea that I'm gonna run through in terms of just an example is a typical Craigslist campaign. About 70% of the leads that are generated with our system are all from online classified sites like Craigslist, like Facebook Marketplace. And I'll give you some sort of typical results here. Now, how much does Craigslist cost to post? $0. So we'll go ahead and put that. We know that it doesn't cost any time cost. How many hours? Well, that's going to vary depending on what kind of production you want. I'd say fairly typically, we'll be really conservative and say that it takes you about 3 hours over the course of a month. Usually somewhere around 10-15 minutes a day-ish to post a couple of ads a day and or renew old ads. Okay, so we'll just say 3 hours over the course of a month. And a typical yield from that kind, and I know some of you are going to go, no way when I say this, but a typical yield from that kind of investment is somewhere going to be around somewhere around 65-ish leads, 2 to 3 leads a day. Okay, so 65 leads over the course of a month. I'm going to hit calculate, and again, you see the green bar, that means great idea. Okay, and the reason, again, our budget per lead is $25 a lead. And my cost per lead, including my time cost, is around $2.31. So you get an idea that you can take any advertising venue. You could put magazine ads. You could put business cards. Well, I spent $15 on a box of business cards and I handed them out all year. Maybe I spent a couple hours total and I generated 1 lead from it. And you can get an idea, oh, it's worth it to have business cards. So, the idea is you want to spend this time of year, really taking a look at every advertising venue that you're doing. Oh, I almost forgot because I wanted to do a typical lead aggregator scenario as well. So this is going to vary. I'm going to use some numbers that Zillow gave me for my market. My market, the average home price is about $150,000. So it's not quite the same as the example or the assumptions that I'm using here. But in my market, they quoted me a price for one zip code, one of the more desirable zip codes in my particular area, of $360. Okay, so I'm going to pop $360 in terms of my time cost. And how many hours does it take me? Almost no time at all. When you sign up with a lead aggregator, they basically just start delivering leads. So we'll just put 0 in there. And how many leads are produced. Now again, this is going to vary depending on, so I'm not necessarily trying to bag on Zillow, but this is the numbers that they gave me for my market. They told me that with that particular zip code, that slot in the zip code, it was going to be $360, and they were going to guarantee between 4 and 6 leads. Okay, so we'll just put 6 in there, and I'm going to hit calculate. Now, now you see the big red bar, bad idea. Again, I'm not trying to bag on Zillow, I'm just looking at it objectively with the numbers. So in this case, it's a bad idea because the cost per lead is $60 per lead. And my budget is $25. I can't spend $60 per lead. That's almost 50% of my gross commission. So you get an idea here how you could use this tool, this advertising evaluator, to be able to kind of review your year. And if you have special circumstances that don't necessarily fit in this advertising calculator, go ahead and post a comment below. Next week we're going to talk a little bit about business planning. So after you look backwards and you see what have I done this year to either reach my goal or not, how can I do better next year? And that's where our business planning is going to come into effect. So you join us next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Same group. Again, just look for the live video to pop up around 2, and go ahead and just click on it, and I'll be here. Feel free to ask questions. If you have any comments or anything, leave them below. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving.